Good morning, everybody. It's nice to be here together. Today is September 29, 2017, and we are on the second day of the U.S. Tour retreat entitled In the Arms of Mother Earth at Ghost Ranch in New Mexico. All the brothers and sisters are very heart-filled to be here, very grateful to be in the presence of so many like-minded practitioners, that you've made the commitment to come all the way here, some from very far away, to support a collective energy of awareness and engagement to protect Mother Earth and also to enrich your own personal practice. This is very inspiring for us. So we have a lot of gratitude for your presence here. We very much look forward to practicing together. This retreat is a practice retreat. And we also touch a deep gratitude for having this very beautiful opportunity just to be in New Mexico, in this beautiful space, to be really held by the land, to touch firsthand what it means to be held in the arms of Mother Earth. This morning we heard a love letter of Mother Earth, and in that love letter we were reminded again that Mother Earth is our ground, that she's the source of not just 1, 2, 3, but all generations of us as humans, as the human species. It's very helpful and comforting to be reminded that our ground is Mother Earth and that we can always take refuge in that. So with that in mind, we'd like to ask everyone to sit comfortably with that clearly in our mind, that we are sitting on our ground, on our source of stability. Dear respected Te, dear elders, dear noble community, I cheated a little bit. We usually start the clock after the bell, so I got my intro in before the bell. A few years ago, we had our first retreat for scientists. I think it was a 21-day retreat, and it was entitled something like The Brain of the Buddha. Maybe some of you were present for that. And in that retreat, Te was very clear on his emphasis, on his focus, is that it's the quality of the mind that is important. Scientists, that retreat was for scientists and those who are science-minded. Scientists use their mind as a tool to discern, to discover a reality in the scientific, through the scientific approach. And Te's focus was on how, as scientists and as human beings, we can practice to be as clear-minded so that we can really be an instrument, our mind can be an instrument to discern what it seeks to discern. So with that in mind, we bring that spirit to this retreat. Most of us came here because of love for Mother Earth, a forward engagement. Maybe some of us also came because of seeking a kind of healing and nourishment at the same time. But we have a commonality in that we've come under the blanket of awareness of what is going on in the environment and a desire to move, to engage, to affect change. So as environmentalists, like scientists, the quality of our mind is also very important in how we can effectively engage and affect change. And this is one of the emphases of this retreat, that we seek the practice in order to sustain, to protect, to maintain, to sharpen the quality of our mind through the practices of mindfulness, so that when we do engage, we engage wisely. When we are engaged, we are not overwhelmed. So just as the earth, Mother Earth, is the grounding of all of us, as practitioners, our grounding, our stability as engaged practitioners are twofold. It is the teachings and it is the practice. We don't need to be told that there's suffering because we already experience that in our daily life, and we see it day in, day out. When we look out, we read the news, we see the growing speed of natural disasters that are occurring around us. So we don't need to be told that there's suffering. But what the teachings are there for us is to reassess what our relationship with that suffering is inside of us, the anxieties and the worries, and also the suffering that's coming to us from the suffering outside. The teachings, the Four Noble Truths, is to help us remember that the place of suffering in our engagement with suffering. So before we jump the gun and become environmentalists actively, there needs to be a cultivation of an awareness and a relationship with suffering so that we step forward with clarity. The Four Noble Truths remind us that it's important, first of all, to acknowledge that there's suffering, but to acknowledge it in such a way that there's a way out or there's a way forward. When I think of this, I often think of a story that my father shared with me about a Tai Chi master. My dad is an avid Tai Chi practitioner, and when he was first beginning Tai Chi, he encountered a video of a Tai Chi master who stood very still, and a line of 10 students lined up against him, kind of charging forward, and he, with a very small flick of his body, he bounced them all back. So this is often our relationship with suffering, meaning the suffering is our master, and we are flung back. And so that image has stayed with me. Let me do this. I'll use that brown. That's better. Yeah, that's nice. So this is our relationship with suffering, our worldly relationship with suffering. We encounter it and we're flung back. It's a marble bouncing off a basketball. And that's what my dad described it as. It was like, it was immovable and they just bounced. But the Four Noble Truths teach us to acknowledge the suffering, but rather than react to it, run away from it, we learn to use suffering as a magnifying glass. So it becomes a magnifying glass for us to see more clearly, what does that suffering hold? And the teachings guide us to look always in the direction, is it craving? Is it hatred? Or is it ignorance? Okay. So that's the first grounding of our engagement as practitioners, the teachings of suffering and the way we relate to it so that we have a way out. We are taught to look into the suffering, through the suffering. So instead of it being a monolithic, solid mass of suffering, it becomes a magnifying glass. To look into it and through it to see its source. Is it craving inside? Is it the craving we see in corporate world, for example? Is it hatred and fear that causes discrimination and inequities? Is it ignorance, a lack of awareness that causes us to trundle on other people's, other species, space, resources? Okay. So from massive suffering, it becomes a magnifying glass, suffering. From a marble, we become an eyeball. Okay. Instead of bouncing, I'm not a good artist, so please bear with me. From bouncing, we become a steady seer, and that's what the Four Noble Truths is about. The second grounding to support the quality of our mind as we engage with suffering and with change that we're trying to affect is the actual practice, and we all know what that is, the practice of mindfulness. Right, the practice of mindfulness. So the question is, how strong is our mindfulness to see us through to the other shore? Because we know that there are, at this point in time, our current situation globally, we know that if we really stop and look seriously at the issue, we know the elephant in the room is that we have to, each one of us, make a radical shift in our life in order to contribute to what we want to change. And it requires no less than that. So how strong is our mind to see us through this without being overwhelmed, falling into despair, falling into judgment, criticism, division, divisiveness, which gets us nowhere. This is why mindfulness practice is so fundamental to the engaged practitioner. We'll come back to this radical shift a little bit later on. So, how many of us here are new to the practice of mindfulness? Okay. I bet you some of you are old practitioners, but you have a beginner's mind. So that's why some people are raising their hand like this. Wise. So as it relates to the issues that are close to our heart, mindfulness practice, it is an attentiveness, an awareness of what is going on. It is an energy that we can cultivate as we train the mind in order to see clearly, with clarity, with equanimity. And these are some of the hallmarks of mindfulness: the non-judgment, non-blame, just the clear looking, the matter-of-fact seeing. And this is what helps us then to see what needs to be done or what needs to not be done. It's an essential ingredient to engage practice. Because if we skip this stopping and looking with clarity and equanimity, we're already on the wrong foot. So many of us want to do well by the world, but without clarity or with too strong of an emotional engagement, we misread the situation, or we actually harm ourselves, or we harm the situation that we're trying to offer help to, contribute to. So this energy of mindfulness has in it already the energy of loving kindness, because it's an attentiveness. It's like an attendant. It's looking, it's open, it's curious, it's wanting to know, it's wanting to see through so that we can together, collectively, find solutions that are viable. So there's no fighting, there's just understanding and then moving from that understanding. So mindfulness, it is a encapsulation of this whole practice of stopping and looking deeply. And many of us have taken the 5 mindfulness trainings, so we are aware of the language embedded so wisely in the mindfulness trainings. And in this retreat, we would like to invite you to, in particular, look more deeply at the 5 mindfulness trainings in the light of awareness. What are we aware of? Intention. What intention is our awareness give rise to? And then the hidden part is the action. What actions are we taking to manifest our awareness and our intention? In particular, the 5th mindfulness training on consumption. The 5th mindfulness training on nourishment and healing. So in practice of mindfulness, it is stopping to become aware that so that we can have a more and more, a deeper understanding of what needs to be done or what needs not to be done. That gives rise to the intention, right intention. And if the intention and the awareness is deep enough, then we're moved to action. Okay. So earlier I was speaking about the need for a radical shift. Okay. A radical shift, front and center in this radical shift is our way of consuming. And specifically our way of consuming as Americans. As Americans, as we relate to the world, and as Americans, as US citizens, as we relate to one another. Okay. So this shift, this radical shift, it doesn't come from nowhere. It needs to be sustained by the teachings of what is really our suffering, what is really our happiness, so that we don't continue to run after the distractions. We don't continue to get lost or dulled by the way we consume. And we can see clearly our habits of consuming and how they really deeply affect, meaning how they contribute to the suffering of so many people, including ourselves in the world. So this is what we, at heart, if we look truly deeply at ourselves and are honest, each one of us can begin to make a very drastic change just by focusing our attention on the way we consume. Okay, so that's the elephant in the room. There's a lot that can be accomplished by putting our heads together to ask for change in the corporate world. But the corporate world is they run by supply and demand, and who's demanding? It's we as the consumers, the individual consumers. Again and again, as we come to the practice of mindfulness, and especially through the lens of the 5 mindfulness trainings, we see there's a relationship between the individual and the collective. We will most probably keep hearing about this. What is the relationship between our individual endeavor and our collective endeavor? And what we would like to share here is that there is no real wall between the two, that they are deeply interwoven. So our drastic change in the way we want and desire and consume will have a drastic effect on what people are asked to put out. So it's a very grassroots and immediate way of effecting change, above and beyond, or deeper than just demanding it without changing something in your life. See, so it's very important that we look into our individual practice. What are we... So when we talk about consuming, the way we consume, the questions we want to ask is, what is it and how much? That's how we, what are we consuming and how much? I'm just wondering, when I say radical, does that scare anybody? Do you have images of like going off the grid or living in New Mexico? Some of you may be off the grid already. It's interesting because the Buddha, he was a radical in his time. Radical means to effect a very far-reaching change in something, a fundamental change. And it's scary if you feel like you're stepping off a cliff. But there's two things that really are a great comfort for us. First of all, we are doing this together as a community of practice, as a sangha. It is not an unknown. This is a path that our teacher's teacher, our root teacher, the Buddha, has walked. So his radical shift was a shift away from the conventions of society. Now flash forward to our current situation. What are the conventions of our society? Is that so bad of a thing to be radical against? Because we see where it has brought us and where it's bringing us. So there's no fear. If we see clearly the suffering, we know the direction is in the opposite direction. And the second comfort is that we are not stepping off a cliff because we are grounded. The grounding of our engaged practices, again, the teachings and our practice of mindfulness. So there's a wisdom in simplifying. There's a wisdom in decluttering. There's a wisdom in being generous and in sharing our resources. It just feels right. It's just that we haven't given ourselves really the space and time to feel what it really feels, to feel right. Okay, so don't be scared to be radical, right? Because you have much support. Your own heart is supporting this, and we have a community of support, and we have the teachings. Let alone our own practice. If we're practicing, this is the direction that it's leading to us in. So this radical shift that we're talking about is, first of all, a shift in our understanding. Earlier I spoke about the Four Noble Truths, that we have a radical shift in our understanding of what suffering means to us. It's helping us to discover the source so that we have a way out. We need to shift also in the way we prioritize our time, our energy, and our material resources. These are the three concrete ways that consumption manifests. How do we spend our time? How do we take time from others? That's also a way of consuming. Where do we put our energy, our senses? what kind of energy and how much energy do we use, even on a very physical level. And of course, materials. What stuff do we accumulate, we buy, we go after? These are the questions that we need to ask ourselves as avid consumers. In the US, I was born and raised in the US, so this is the milieu that I've grown up in. And I have actually not very many windows into the way of life, the standards of living, the limitations that are in other areas of the world. But I do remember there was one incident that opened my eyes, one of a few. I remember visiting Vietnam back in 2005, visiting my grandmother. And as a monastic, we tend to think that we are already doing okay by the simple living, simple living, we're doing okay. So I felt, as a monastic, I've chosen this life and I'm living a simple life. I had quite a shock one afternoon when I came to visit my grandmother, and I placed my sandals where the shoes are supposed to go. We were being visited by other monastics. They were coming to lend support to offer chanting. And when they came, they also came and lined up their sandals. And I have to say, when I looked, I was suddenly deeply embarrassed. Because what I thought was very simple, my sandals, was actually quite extravagant by their standards. They had wooden clogs with a string. And mine was some sort of something or other, branded something with rubber, and it was like a Ferrari compared to their bicycle. And it was just a shock for me, and it made me realize that no matter where we are, there is something to be learned, there's something to deepen in our way of understanding. And I came from that experience with a humbler attitude about this path of simplifying. And I realized that no matter how simple I am, I could be simpler. Yeah. And just by the fact that we as Americans, we live in this environment, we are surrounded by a kind of norm. That if we don't take the time to really look, to explore and learn about other cultures, other situations, then we won't have a very balanced view of the world, and we will continue to live in a way that's inequitable, just out of ignorance, not out of intention, but just because that's our collective karma as Americans, in a way. There's a blind spot there. So the time we take, it may be inequitable. The energy that we consume is inequitable. The material resources that we take are inequitable. And what we already see this. We enjoy so many technological gadgets. And there are wastelands of technology in other countries that are holding those just over the zenith technological gadgets that we've thrown away. But this is our norm, this is our standard. So there needs to be something that makes us stop and be willing to look at what we feel entitled to. What is our norm? And what is that? It's our Sangha, it's our own practice in our heart. Our heart to explore the suffering that we're seeing now. We're starting to hear from and we're starting to see, and now it's coming back and we're experiencing it for ourselves. Okay, so time, energy, and material resources. In the 5th mindfulness training, or is it the 2nd mindfulness training? Which one is it? I will share, I think it's the 2nd mindfulness training about generosity. it speaks specifically about that. I will share my time, energy, and material resources with those who are in real need. How do we define who's in real need? Our child may love that toy and we can offer that toy, but is there another way that we can use those resources to maybe offer a deeper gift of generosity, a model of generosity, to maybe give to charity, to show our children another way of relating to material resources that isn't so me-oriented, but is more and more aware of the inequities around and always seeking to find some sort of balance. So hand in hand with mindful consumption is the practice of simple living, simple mindful living. Or we can say learning how to let go and knowing that enough is enough. And this gets to the heart of awareness. What is our happiness? Do we hang it on material things and of having, of obtaining? Or do we hang it on something else, something that's more of the spirit, something that can truly be shared heart to heart, people to people? In one of our chants, there's a line that says, I vow to live simply and sanely with few possessions, keeping my body healthy. And those things are linked together. If we are too cluttered in our materials, our mind becomes naturally cluttered. And if our mind is cluttered, we cannot take care of the things that are coming up that need to be taken care of. Physically, emotionally, mentally, there's stress that accumulates. So the simplification of materials is also to protect and train the mind to see more clearly, to focus on the things that need to be focused on. The image is like a kind of cloud of consumption. And as we learn to simplify, we kind of take those clouds away and are no longer distracted by that ambiguity. We can more clearly see what's most important in our lives. So we always want to be concrete in our sharings and our practice. So I don't want to say that engaging in the practice so that you can make these very radical shifts in the way you consume and simplify is as easy as that. It always needs to have that foundation of awareness. It needs to be supported by a regular practice of meditation, again, to keep our mind alert to the suffering out there, keep our mind from becoming complacent. We, in our community, are very lucky that we have sanghas, like the Earth Holder Sangha, that is kind of putting the flame to this, to bring this out, so that we can more easily access the action, awareness, intention, and action aspect of our practice. How many of us are active members here of Earth Holder? Okay. I'm surprised. I thought there would be more Earth Holders here. So hopefully by the end of this retreat, we will have a quadruple-fold number of hands. That's part of the engaged part of practice in our community. If you have had a chance to look at the pamphlet that everyone has, a very beautiful document is the Earth Holder Commitment, which walks us through this practice of awareness, intention, and action. And especially, the aspect that I especially appreciate about this is that it encompasses both the individual and collective effort. That we can step forward and do actions in our individual life, in our family life, and also we join awareness and forces to begin a more global engagement together, all in the spirit of mindful, nonviolent action. So if you haven't had the chance yet to look, you feel like you need some ideas of how to actively implement your deep and positive intention, this is a very concrete way of moving forward. This is an example of how action will manifest our intention. And perhaps there are things that aren't on this list that you are already doing or that you have the intention of doing. And please feel free to add that to your personal list, share that in your Sangha, so we build a momentum of awareness, intention, and action. And I am coming over my time, so my brother is very generous. So these are some of the themes I would like to just highlight for us to keep in mind as we go through the sutra, individual and collective, right? Being concrete with moving as our awareness grows. How does it manifest in our intention concretely? How does it manifest in our actions concretely? Concrete practice. Looking at consumption as both a cause and effect. So we talk about supply and demand. As we consume, we become the cause of more demand. So there's a real motivation to change our way of consumption just by knowing that. That's an example of a cause. There's also consumption as an effect. And this, the fifth mindfulness training, shines beautiful light on all the areas of physical reasons that we consume, mentally, emotionally. What's pushing us to reach for that thing, that item, that sensory overload? So it is also a way of becoming more healthy by having a healthy diet, as they would say, a healthy diet of consumption. So a radical shift, it's grounded in our practice, it's grounded in the teachings, and it's a call for moderation. It's not a call for abstinence. As human beings, we are part of a living organism, Mother Earth, and we also contribute our part, but it's just that we've gone way over. And again, I have to emphasize, as Americans, we have an extra heavy responsibility to look and change, personally and collectively. This is our karma. Nothing overstated in that area. But again, it's not a matter of abstaining, but of living in harmony with our larger community. There's a feeling of dissatisfaction deep down when we feel, if you know that you're enjoying comforts, but on the other side of the world, just because you're consuming this, that, and the other thing, there's a lot of suffering going on. How can we really be happy, honestly? How can you really feel that you're doing your full part? How can we really honestly say that we are doing all that we can for our children to protect them? Our children, meaning the global community. So I'd like to end on that note that our path before this is grounded radicalism. Okay? Grounded radicalism. Thank
you. Dear respected teachers, dear beloved community, it's always a treat to have a chance to sit up here with Sister True Vow and follow her. I don't feel like I have to say too much. It's nice for me. I wanted to follow on a little bit with what I heard, which was radical community, radical grounded, and to me it brings up an image of roots going down into the earth of a big giant tree. We're all part of that tree. Sorry for the it's like a kind of mosquito sound in the background with the microphone. I think it's like a high-pitched whining. So sorry about that, but it can be a bell of mindfulness for us. And yeah, so this is the image I like a lot of a great tree that has roots that go down deeply into the earth. It's kind of a symbol that I like for our community. And I think that sometimes I also like the image of those roots spreading out underground, and they have this patient strength, and they can slowly crack sidewalk and cement. So sometimes I like to think, I live in our monastery at Blue Cliff, which is in New York, and we're about an hour and a half. I live with Sister Tay, and there also we live together there, and sometimes I imagine Blue Cliff is like this tree, and the roots from the monastery going down, 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 spreading all the way to New York City. And one day, the whole city will wake up. Can you imagine? It's a nice vision. I think it's very important for us to plant seeds. If we don't have the courage to plant the seed in our consciousness and the consciousness of others, if we're afraid to plant it, it doesn't have a chance to, it will never have a chance to sprout up, So I also like that, along with what Sister True Vow was sharing, it's a kind of act of courage to come back to the roots and to put out seeds. And that's one seed. I think it's very beautiful. We can imagine a place like New York City or Los Angeles, and the energy of mindfulness when it spreads underground. Like also you can think of the network of mycelium that make the mushrooms, that help the communication between the trees. That's also kind of like the energy of mindfulness kind of spreads invisibly. And so I hope you can see and dream with me that one day our cities in the United States will wake up like that. It will start to transform. One thing I think, at least for me, that's really important to help that the possibilities manifest is to understand maybe some of the obstacles or blocks that we might have. And I also see that when we take those away, we also are able to touch a kind of love. I think that this is something Sister True Vow shared in another Dharma talk at Deer Park. It's mindfulness is a kind of love, right? It's the first aspect of love, being there. You're present, you're there. And that's, Thai's teaching to, I am here for you, or I know you are there, and I'm so happy. These are the mantras on love. So I think of mindfulness also as the energy of love. And I also, it's a little bit inspiring for me sitting in this hall, because I think it's called agape, which is the Greek word for love. And I also see that's the energy that will help us have the strength and the courage to be radical and to get free. They kind of go back and forth, they support each other, you know. A little bit of love, a little bit of mindfulness, a little bit more freedom, a little bit more courage helps us to love even more. And I think Dr. Martin Luther King also shared that title of one of his sermons, or I could get it wrong, but I think it's Strength to Love. It takes some strength to do that, courage. So, not too much talking. How about we do exercise to build our capacity to be there and to love? Would you like to do that? Just kind of break, just take a break from talking. And also, we've been sitting a little while, so how about we just stretch a little bit mindfully and get yourself ready to stand up? And then we can, some are already standing as you're, well, my sister's going to give us a bell to stand up together. So we're doing that together. I know it's noble silence still, but one or two words of connection, of greeting, like, you know, so you connect a little bit. Okay. Great. Some people are... Feel some love already, right? That's great. Okay, we're going to take that even deeper. So now let us... just establish ourselves in our body, mindfulness of the body, so you can close your eyes. Being there for yourself. This is the first step, right? First step of love. Begin with the most immediate sensations, the body, and feeling into our bodies, allowing ourselves to be as we are, naturally seated, comfortable. See what's happening in the sensations of the body, whether it's pleasant or unpleasant. Just being there. See if we can make space for what is there. Take a few breaths like that, listening to the sound of the bell and being there for our bodies as they are, our experience. You might notice there is some unpleasant sensation in the body, some tightness or tension. You can also do like we did this morning, just to be there for that. See if we can approach it gently with some acceptance and curiosity. So if it comes up naturally, the feeling of wanting to take care, to embrace, that's wonderful. Sometimes it just comes up, or you might even touch a feeling of joy as it softens, if you notice any softening. But again, we don't have to change that. We don't have to change anything. We can just be there. Now I'd like to invite us to imagine a place on the earth that feels very safe and welcoming to us. It might be a childhood place, or it might be right here. But it's safe and peaceful. And if you'd like, you can invite someone to be there with you, someone who feels very safe to you. Could be our teacher or another teacher or a family member. Could be an animal. But it's very safe and soothing person. Just take a few breaths to let that come into your mind. You can see, if you're there with someone or something, you can see the energy of care is also there for you. And you can rest on the earth. Maybe that person is saying to you that it's okay. It's okay to have some pain. They might hold your hand or smile. So see if the energy of care and soothing comes up. It might feel warm in your body, in your heart. And if it doesn't arrive, it's okay also, just to be there, with whatever is arising. Okay, so now I'd like us to open our eyes and take a look at our partner. Try to imagine that they have just been doing this practice. They have ancestors. They carry maybe they carry some wounds from the past. Maybe their ancestors have some suffering, but they also have some beauty. See their strengths and joy. They're alive in front of you. So seeing them for a little bit with open eyes, and then we can return to closed eyes. And now sending this energy of care that you have generated, wishing the other person to be well, safe, peaceful, free, that they would get the insight to see the way out of any pain or difficulty they have. Just take a few breaths to feel that. Okay, I'd like you to open your eyes and look again at the person. And if you'd like to say thank you or bow or connect in any other way, you may. Okay. How's the love? So I think if we have enough love, yeah, we don't need much of anything else. And the love of the earth for us is also very great, offering us air, water, shelter, food every day, and have a chance to cultivate that love in community. There was one thing I did want to say. It's another one. It's a kind of obstacle that it's personal for me. So, and I think a lot of us have it. So I want to talk about it. It's the kind of feeling that I'm not enough. So it's kind of the opposite. Like I don't have enough, and I'm not enough. Like I haven't done enough. Right? So sometimes that drives us. I need to be, who wants to be a good practitioner here? Okay. Let's all throw that away. Okay? Just take it. Right? We all want to be somehow good, right? You want to do the right thing, you want to be well. I think, at least for me, it's helpful to say that I am enough as I am. You know, and I do have some weaknesses, but I also have some strengths. So I can focus on the strengths, I can take care of the weaknesses, but it's okay to have that. And I was asking my brother the other day, he had a thing, maybe it was on his shirt, no, he had something, it said, be a real human being. I think that's better than good practitioner. Is that okay? I don't know. It's a judgment on my part a little bit. But I think that also sets up the energy of judgment, right, for us. This is not good enough. This person is not good enough. This way of doing things is not good enough. So I think for me it's very important to come home to this space of I am loved as I am. Right? It's a starting point, foundation, radical root. It's not because of what I've done that I am loved, but because I am. I am part. I can't be separated. I can't be separated. I think that for me is that a big part of the Buddha's teaching, and also Jesus's teaching on love, is that we are one. We're together in this together. So cultivating that is a big thing, and I think sometimes many of you have probably heard of Brené Brown. She's another great teacher for our time, talks a little bit about shame, and that's one of the things where we say, I'm not enough, right? There's something wrong with me, I can't. So that's a big obstacle for us to move through if we want to really be radical in community. And we can help each other with that, I think, when we're cultivating mindfulness and this energy of compassion and love. And then today, like, we're going to do Dharma sharing, so you can be there. And one of the things she talks about is that if we can speak out about what feels very shameful to us, or that is stuck inside, and it can be received with empathy and understanding, then that will transform. The shame will not be a barrier to us anymore. So that's been helpful, very helpful for me in Dharma sharing practice. Wanted to offer that. But I've also learned that sometimes you don't have to say anything. There's a great power. I'm practicing today during the walking meditation was I entrust myself to the earth, as we practiced last night, but also I entrust myself to the Sangha, to the community of practice. You're also carrying what's a little bit wounded in me, stuck still, which there's plenty of things. I think another area that's difficult for us to approach, Sometimes I get in trouble with my brothers because I bring up this topic a lot, but keep looking at this, is our sexuality, because it's also one of the main drivers behind what is causing us so much suffering in the world today. And there's so many of us, and there's a push in us to survive and to continue. It's very powerful. And so it's important for us to come face to face with that, with compassion and understanding, and not fear, so we can embrace it and use it as a source of love. Yeah, so that's also something I wanted to say. And not to be ashamed of either. Sometimes we hold it like a shameful thing. The last thing I will end on is as joy as another really essential element of love. And we've already been talking about cultivating the mind of love a little bit through mindfulness and being present and seeing the wonders of life. So that's one of the, there's, that there are the four immeasurable minds that don't have any limit to their capacity and that we can cultivate. So compassion, we just did that a little bit. And joy is another one. So cultivating joy. There's two more. I leave it to you to research, but save time. There's 3 minutes, so here I leave you with some words of wisdom from the Buddha. I was also practicing walking around today. I entrust myself to the Buddha, and I was also saying she entrusts herself to me. It's also helpful for me to break through some of the boundaries of gender separation that exists as another wound in our culture and society. Transform. So, of course, you could say they also. They entrust themselves to me. Okay, so this is number 15 in the Dhammapada. It's joy. Let us live in joy and love among those who hate. Among those who hate, let us live in love. Let us live in joy, in health among those who are ill. Among those who are ill, let us live in health. Let us live in joy, in peace among those who struggle. Among those who struggle, let us live in peace. So it's just 3, but it goes on. It's quite powerful, beautiful. There's also a line in here about living in harmony. And I thought I'd add that too. That's also something that's really important to me. I find valuable is part of acceptance and openness is that we can allow each other to be different. We're not all playing the same note in the choir. And that's called, but we're not fighting each other either. So that's called harmony, I think, when different sounds, but they can flow together. So giving ourselves and others permission to be different, even to have suffering and to not be awake. There may be people in our lives that we don't know how to relate to, that we know they're causing pain to ourselves or to others, and maybe there's still a way that we can be in harmony and we can reach them with compassion and care and understanding. I've heard that for those who are suffering greatly and maybe causing lots of suffering because of that, trying to find anything to get relief, that criticizing them or condemning their action helps very little. Maybe you have that experience. I think I have. Anyone have that experience? But being there with love and understanding to accept that person and hear their pain has made a difference in people's lives. I think that's my case too. I didn't think that I was a person who was worthy of much of anything. In fact, at one time, it was about 20 years ago, I was in a lot of pain. And that pain kind of just accumulated, like reinforced itself. The more pain, the less I felt I was worthy of being loved or of any kind of kindness. It wasn't that bad, okay. But the thing that helped me the most was reading in Thai's book, the Heart of the Buddha's Teaching. His own experience, like, I grew up in a time of war in deep pain. And it was because it's not in spite of pain, but because there's pain that there's a path. There's a path to well-being. And gave me some hope that that's possible. And so that was the beginning. Thank you very much for listening.